This one's tough.
Because if it turns out she failed a test, and this to the great frustration of a lot of people on the left, I do think past high school that it's okay for organizations, whether it's professional organizations or the Olympics, to do testing and to say, hey, we're going to even exclude trans athletes. Okay, so a lot of the people on the left will disagree with me on that. Some of you, obviously some folks on this panel disagree with that.
To be clear, our flagship show discussed the Imani Khalif drummed up controversy where outlets like the Boston Globe took the right-wing bait and ran with it like this. I'm going to be clear though, I don't think this conversation called for Cenk, my CEO and boss, inserting his opinion on trans athletes' inclusion, because this is not what it is about at all. Panelist Francesca Fiorentini would weigh in.
But I will say, and I will push back, because I do feel like some of the anti-trans athlete speak is a slippery slope into broader anti-trans behavior and also policing of athletes writ large beyond Khalif. Earlier this week, a rugby player for the American team, Ilona Maher, was called a man because she's 6'6" and a massive unit. And she successfully helped that team win bronze, the very first time an American team has won a medal in rugby. And she was called a man. Why? Because she's big, because she's a rugby player. And so when we start to say that trans people can't play in Olympic sports, right? They can't play in the sport of their chosen gender. Then we start to, everyone becomes a cop, and everyone starts to look at everyone's makeup and their muscles and their cheekbones and what looks different and what they think in their subjective mind a woman or a man should and does look like. And so I just want to say that sometimes when we traffic in these ideas that trans people should not be able to participate in sports at these levels, it does lead to things like Jesse Waters openly saying that on primetime television. And I want to just center that when we stand with trans people, yes, even trans athletes, that all goes away and we stand with them no matter what. But you start to dabble and you open up, everyone becomes genital police.
So it's a fair point. As you all know, we discussed Ilona Maher last week in a previous video, how even after succeeding, she became teary-eyed because some were what's called transvestigating her, and it led to this.
I'm gonna be very real here for a second. As you can probably tell, I've been crying a little bit. I always get these comments, but like recently it kind of ramped up. I get comments being called a man and being called masculine and asking if I'm on steroids. There will always be negative people out there, and they put women in a box, and they think of women should be fragile and petite and quiet and meek, but that's not the case. Women can be strong, and they can have broad shoulders, and they can take up space, and they can be big. I think I'm getting emotional because I feel very passionate about this. Don't let anybody try to define or dictate how you feel about yourself. You get to decide that.
And it wasn't just Maher. Right-wingers then got in a tizzy at Katie Ledecky, the dominant swimmer. They did the same with Simone Biles. It was pathetic, completely pathetic. MSNBC's Caitlin Burns would write for the outlet, "There are no trans women at this year's Olympics. There are 2 non-binary athletes competing in their assigned sex at birth category, but no trans women." Years of anti-trans activists and conservatives openly raging at any sporting organization that even hinted at including trans women in women's sports succeeded in killing the Olympic dream for any trans kids watching this year's games. Back to the discussion on the main show.
You've done it,
I
Cenk.
totally
You've
disagree.
done it.
I totally disagree. So, first of all, when you have an extreme
Obviously
position, you have an extreme position that says, no, we don't ever ask anyone. And I think the Olympics position is actually absurd. They don't do any genetic testing. They don't do any testing. So you could, since they don't do any testing at all, you can just walk in, call yourself a female, not be trans. Trans people are actually
do it, Cenk. Do it.
Okay, yeah, all right. Well, you could say it, but then what's going to happen?
Rugby,
Somebody's going to do it, and they're going to get away with it, and then everybody's going to be furious. Okay, it's all right. I can't stand it, and it doesn't help trans people at all to have these extreme positions. Oh yeah, don't test anyone, just take their word for it. I think it's terrible politics.
It's not an
But
extreme position. It comes from a position of human rights, and it does help
It's
all
not a
people.
human right
And what
to
you-
compete
what
in the
you
other
see there,
gender's
What you see
sport.
there is when what you just saw are women, are biological women, being attacked for being trans because of the anti-trans athletic narrative that has already festered and has now come for these women. And so what are the women to do? Say, I'm not a man. In fact, screw, like, I'm not a trans man. Are you kidding me? No. We all stand in solidarity together. That's how we actually fight the right.
So let's unpack something Cenk said. He ripped the International Olympic Committee for its lack of gender testing. That is true. The IOC is using boxing eligibility rules that were applied at the 2016 and 21 Olympics and don't include gender testing. And there may be a reason for it, though. So you're going to want to hear this. At Northeastern University, experts argue they are arbitrary, used to unfairly scrutinize women, and often don't take into account the range of health conditions that can impact a person's gender presentation. Kind of important. KJ Rawson, professor of English and Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies, director of the Humanities Center, would say, who I'm going to reach out to after this piece to have him on. Since sex is determined by a number of different factors, chromosomes, hormones, internal and external genitalia, secondary sex characteristics, etc., and most people are never tested for these factors, governing bodies need to determine which test they will require and which factors they value most for their eligibility criteria. Rose Eveleth, who you see here, is an award-winning reporter, and she spoke with Science Quickly and Rachel Feltman and explained the gender testing, the history, and more.
Now we have this very problematic idea around like a very rigid sex binary, right? That there's like X, 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 Y, like, you know, biological male, biological female.
Sure.
Which obviously is not actually how humans are, you know, distributed in this clear bimodal situation.
Then she would also say this.
So 1928, you immediately get people being like, that's not a woman, that's not a woman, you know, like you hear people talk about Hitomi Kinue, who is a Japanese runner, and in the newspapers they say, you know, she has all the power of a halfback. She should be playing for the Chicago Bears is a thing that they actually printed about this woman, which is also very funny looking at it now because you see photographs of these women who are being described as like absolute units and they just look like regular people.
Let's pause there. Hitomi Kanu would become the first woman to represent Japan at the Olympics. She also became the first female from this country to win a medal, picking up a silver in the 800 meters. She would tragically die young.
In 1936, the first official policy in that regard is passed by the International Amateur Athletic Federation, which is now known as World Athletics, the governing body of track and field. And that policy allows them to pull aside any suspicious female, and they don't really say what warrants suspicion. It's sort of a very like you'll know it when you see it kind of situation. And the policy allows for an examination of that athlete. So that would be a nude inspection.
Which, to be clear, is embarrassing. It is completely demoralizing. More from Eveleth.
In 1966, they decide that doing this on a case-by-case basis or sort of this ad hoc kind of way is not good. We need to do it to all women. And they institute what are now known as the nude parades, also sometimes known as the peek and poke tests, which were every woman who competed in track and field had to go into a room and get naked in front of a panel, sometimes one person, sometimes more than one, to be confirmed that their body looked correct for a woman.
Wow.
She would then go on to say this. In 1968, they changed the policy, opting for a chromosome test, meaning every woman competing had to take a sex test, then get a certificate of femininity that looks a little bit like your driver's license, and bring it with you everywhere, no matter the competition. That would last until 1999.
The thing that's really interesting about this period of time is that immediately, like as soon as the IOC and the IAAF start using this chromosome test, you have doctors and scientists being like, whoa, hold on. This won't do any of the things that you say it's going to do. It will not necessarily catch all men who try to enter women's competition because some men can have XX chromosomes. All you're going to do is catch women who have no idea there's anything different about them. You know, there was a 30-year campaign by these scientists to write to the IOC, to write to World Athletics and be like, guys, like, don't do this. This doesn't work. It's not scientifically sound. The guy whose test they were using wrote to the IOC and the IAAF being like, please stop doing this. And they were like, no, thanks. And it took a ton of work to try and convince these organizations to drop these tests.
Fast forward to 2024. Evelyn would say on the pod, different federations have different takes. Many federations just let people compete, some don't. World Athletics does have a policy on the books, what they call DSD eligibility policies. And the situation today is that if you are an athlete who has one of their defined DSD conditions, so they have a list of which ones count, and essentially it's ones that offer you a high level of testosterone that your body can use. If you have one of these regulated, DSDs, that means that you do have to manipulate your body's biology in order to lower your T levels down to a certain point. Two ways to do this, she would explain. The first is surgery. The other is taking meds to lower your T levels. She would add, the World Medical Association has come out saying this is medically unethical. You should not be requiring people to take drugs to manipulate their biology so that they can compete in the sex category that they already occupy. This was the case that we have gone over a few different times with Caster Semenya of South Africa. And you know what really screwed her over? A competitor, a white woman, who went to the media and said, "What are we even doing? It's completely unfair." It's how she was born. And I'm going to get into this via Dan Wolken of USA Today. We don't question why someone grows to 7 feet tall with unnatural agility for their size. We don't give a second thought to someone having naturally greater lung capacity than their competitors to get them to the finish line first in a marathon. We don't say that someone has an unfair advantage in the swimming pool because they abnormally have massive feet to propel them, or because their body makes far below the average amount of lactic acid. He's talking about Michael Phelps. What we say is that they hit the genetic lottery. We call them freaks, and it's a compliment. But that doesn't seem to apply when it comes to women whose bodies might make more testosterone than their competitors, or whose chromosome structure might look like a man's, even though they have women's body parts and are considered women in every other possible way. That is a phenomenal point, and it is one that is lost on so many, and I fear it may have potentially been lost on this very network as well. From Rawson once more, what we're seeing in the current Olympics is a continuation and extension of the hyper-scrutiny that is placed on certain female athletes whose sex is being challenged, largely because some people think they look too masculine. On point. Notably, this is a separate conversation from how trans athletes compete, though these issues are certainly related. So in my view, Jank cannot rely on a gender test and just draw the line there. Because basically how I see it is, yeah, it's the gender test, but it's just one branch of the tree to this entire formula, to the entire forest, perhaps. It's a way of narrowing it to present it to the audience, in my view. And I don't think he's wrong. I think this just needs to be talked about more. And in addition, we need to rely on experts in their fields, not, kick streamers, not Matt Walsh. We need to rely on people who have studied this, not some who latch onto it to score cheap political points. On the panel, though, I will say, John brought up some great points as well.
J.K. Rowling and Elon Musk and Riley Gaines and Donald Trump and Valentina Gomez and Jesse Waters and literally all of them complaining about this. None of them give one single quantum of a damn about women's boxing. I want to be super clear about that. None of them watched a boxing match. They didn't watch this one. None of them, even after this, will watch a single one. They don't care about women's boxing more than they care about literally any women's sport, to be very, very clear. And on the evaluation of what is a woman, a question they love to ask, they kept saying it's not a social construct. It's not a frame of mind. It's not what you believe yourself to be. It's not an identity. It's in your pants. It's your genitals. Oops, that's not good enough. It's not that, because she has too much testosterone. That's it. It's the hormones. If you change your hormones, then it doesn't matter if you were born with a vagina. You're not anymore because your hormones changed. Now you're a man. But they don't believe that hormone replacement therapy changes your gender. They've never given ground on that. And suddenly that's their retreat point, is if your hormones are out of whack, it doesn't matter what's in your pants. The entire thing is ridiculous. And the final point I want to make, and I apologize, I've been thinking about this for like 48 hours straight. if they wanted to talk about protecting women, there's a rapist at the Olympics right now. There's a volleyball player who raped a 12-year-old. They don't got anything to say about that because they don't care because they're not paying attention. But also, to be clear, if they wanted to talk about how important female athletes are and their amazing accomplishments and all that, and if they could ever bring themselves to do that without it being about a trans athlete, Katie Ledecky became the most decorated American woman in Olympic history. Simone Biles is now the most decorated female gymnast in world history. The literal GOAT. They did amazing historic things, and not a single one of these people cares at all about it. Not interested whatsoever, because women are irrelevant. All of this is a defense mechanism from a movement of misogynists that know how regressive they look when it comes to women and are constantly desperately looking for a shallow cloak that allows them to pretend that they give a damn about women for even a single second. That's all this is.
Amen.
Yeah.
And also, just a correction, it's cisgender, not biological. So let's just be able to say cisgender women. We should normalize cisgender. That's easy enough for us to do.
I will only say that when I say that, I'm saying it's the way they use that term. I don't use that term, but they say that's what they want, and then it's not good enough in the end.
So that is just where I stand. Where do you? If you can and are willing, please become a paid member here at TYT Sports. And or go to tyt.com/join. In addition, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Appreciate it. Have a great day.